Okay, welcome everyone. It's good to see you here at Conversations in American Democracy. We have lots to talk about, as we always do, and as I constantly repeat, I put out a flyer with some topics on on Sunday, and by Wednesday, the whole world has turned upside down and changed, and we'll talk about it all. But let's become a little familiar first with the Constitution that should be governing our
used to govern.
Past tense. And Kurt has something about that. Good.
Okay. This is the amendments. Basically, what I'm talking about are the amendments to the Constitution, and the first 10 amendments are basically called the Bill of Rights. And I'll just go over the first one, which we all know, but we all should know more and dig into it a bit. First off, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition government for the redress of grievances. So this amendment 1 is what most people think is the most important, and I would say so too, because there should be no law stopping us from speaking. And anyway, that's where I am with this. I think everybody else or anybody else can contribute something here if they feel that these laws or this amendment is not probably the most important amendment. Does anybody feel different?
So I heard you say that you felt it was important that we should be able to speak, but the First Amendment is the religion.
Well, it's got three.
No,
it's
part of it.
Religion, press, and
It's all part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Assembly is part of it.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's got multifaceted, not just religion, but religion is important of it. I will be the first to say.
Yeah.
If you very quickly again, if you were to give America a grade from A plus down to, is there an F minus or an F? How are we doing on compliance with the First Amendment?
F.
Yeah, horribly. Anybody have anything
Do
good
we
or
still
positive? Do we still have a First Amendment?
So I have a question that has not been answered yet. The Constitution of the United States applies to and gives rights to who?
The individual.
Who's the individual? By definition in that book,
White
who
male.
falls under, and Kathy's making an interesting point. That
Which I
is,
didn't hear, could you say
White
it?
Say it again,
male.
then we're going down the long
White
tail.
male plantation owners, that's who.
Well, according to the
Landowners.
preamble, it's we the people
We the people.
of the United States.
right,
yeah.
but when the Constitution was written,
It was white men.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so the question that I pose to people and young people, they don't even understand who it applies to. And as we're being attacked on the 14th Amendment of what defines a citizen, and now I just heard this morning, they want to redo the 2020 census because they felt that it had been manipulated because they want Republicans, Trump, DeSantis, want to exclude non-citizens, which has always been provided as coverage of we the people. And so at an interesting point, because I haven't been able to find in there any stable clarity of this is a book full of rights and all of that, but when somebody goes, who does it apply to? Does it apply to a nationalized citizen? I have a neighbor down the street that's here from Ukraine, was given here TPS by Biden. They were just told by their attorney to move to a blue state as soon as possible. Because Trump has
Targeted.
closed all
Yeah.
the TPS, which is the temporary citizenship, and family of 4 kids.
Yeah.
is it?
If I could
So
interrupt,
anyway,
Kurt, would you read the opening phrase of the Fifth Amendment, please?
Okay, no person shall be held.
Stop right there. No person. It doesn't say citizen, doesn't say only green card holders or anything. No person. So I would argue that it applies to all persons, regardless of their
And in
citizenship.
general, in support of that idea, I think people generally would agree that the Declaration of Independence is a document that puts forward what America stands for and believes. And it says, we believe that these truths are self-evident, and that these rights were given by God, not by man, not by a constitution. You have these rights because you're a human being. And that is really a basic tenet of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And they're
That-
inalienable
that-
rights.
That this government is not giving you rights, but this document is stating which rights the government definitely cannot go near. That's really, basically should be the
Yeah.
idea. So the idea is that anything that we would call a right, or liberty, or whatever else, is generally, if we think an American should have it, we think that a Russian should have it, and a Cuban should have it, and an Iranian should have it, and should not be withheld from anyone that's living inside the United States. I think it's, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it's pretty clear.
And yet, we're going to take naturalized citizens, and we're going to take that back, okay, and deport them if they have done or received anything, I think, above a traffic violation. That was the latest headline that I saw.
Yeah.
It was enough to make you
But,
throw up.
by the way, don't raise your hand. You need sharp elbows. Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, I guess my question to the attorney who advised your Ukrainian neighbors, what difference does it make if you're in a blue state or a red state when we look at what happened to the Columbia University student who was protesting in favor of Palestinian
Yeah.
rights, who was picked up on the streets of New York, his wife was living in Boston, or there were other instances in Boston? It doesn't appear to matter. You're not-
Perception.
They need
Yeah.
to go to Canada before the
Yeah,
23rd.
Yeah, I mean, I
Exactly.
just don't think they're any safer
Yeah.
in a blue state based on what we've been seeing.
I certainly would
Yeah.
feel safer.
By the way,
I'm gonna jump in
yeah, go ahead.
on something else that you said, that being I'm the family historian on Ancestry all the time and using the census data for a lot of things. So when you said that, I mean, we're mid-census, and the thing that struck me is if they decide they're gonna do a mid-census, whether they invalidate 2020 or not, that mid-census census gives anybody the right to go knocking on doors saying, I'm here to take census, and guess what? If you're not, if you're not born here, that's another way to grab people up and shove them in those
Yeah.
prisons that he's actively developing.
And if they're worried about the budget and laying off all these federal workers, now we're going to do a census?
Of which I was
Really?
one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, federal worker,
Yeah,
FAA.
okay.
Yeah.
And I was a
Educator.
I was a census
Right.
taker at one
Wiped out our
time.
entire
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
But for those that you don't remember, and this is the funny part. Now, again, it's noise. He says things every day
Every day.
that get us talking, which 90% of it never happens. But the ironic is, and if you go to the conversation that DeSantis and Trump had down in
At the
South
Alligator.
Florida,
Yeah.
that's when they brought it up.
Yeah.
The census was going on when Trump was in office. You know this because Trump tried to add the citizenship question to the paperwork and was defeated. It was found to be unconstitutional because our Constitution says when you take a census, you have to take it of all peoples.
That was before
Yeah,
we had the
yeah.
current Supreme Court, however.
Right, that too. I'd like
This
to
is
take a
it.
step before Al's comment, and that is to recognize that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were there to empower individuals and limit the government.
Yes.
Now, the Constitution is being used to limit individuals and empower the government. And
What
that's
scares
sad
me
thing.
is
Oh, sure.
redefining what an American citizen is according to the Constitution. Now, as you said, they are saying that a naturalized citizen
Yeah,
may not have the protection of the Constitution.
right.
And a person who is in birthright by the Constitution does not have the protection anymore of the Constitution.
Does that include his own son?
Yeah.
And wife,
And
Yeah,
his wife.
And wife.
wives.
Wives.
Wife.
I was gonna say
And
the
women
same
no
wives.
And
longer-
wives, yeah, you're right.
Women no
You're
longer
right.
have all the protections. I mean, when a person who is basically dead is kept on life support for 5 freaking months to have a baby, okay, when she is basically dead in Georgia, okay? I want to know, I woke up in the middle of the night wondering, who the hell is paying all those medical bills? Are they going to
Yeah.
saddle that poor husband? If I was him,
Yeah.
I'd take that baby and I'd drop it on the doorstep of the Supreme Court and say, you wanted it, you raise it.
Tell us how you
Sorry.
really feel.
Yeah,
I agree with you too, because we're all those people who are pro-life. Where are they signing up for these babies that are not going to have
Never,
homes?
yeah.
That are not going to have care?
Yeah, but
I mean, we both taught in a public education system where the biggest impediment to learning is hunger.
after, the American citizens are going to start to deport after they get rid of some of these naturalized people. They're going to go after the trans, okay? Then they're going to go after the gays, and then there'll be a toss-up between the women and the blacks, whoever they think is going to make the most trouble.
It's all found in, and I'm reading again, Chapter 4 of The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich
Third Reich.
by William Shirer. Okay, I'm afraid so.
In
So,
regard to what you're saying as far as teaching in schools, some journalist recently said that he thought, it was just his opinion, that he thought that feeding a kid breakfast before school might have more impact on his education than the 10 Commandments hanging in the
the
room.
classroom,
Okay.
might.
Maybe.
Yeah. Mark, what's going on in local government? Briefly, please. Anything? No? Or
well,
don't we want to know about it?
We're entering a very important time in our yearly efforts with the city. Starting next Tuesday, the city council will start receiving presentations from all of the departments on their 2025-26 budget. Where and how they're going to spend all this money that we're giving the city. They've put out some rough skeleton examples of what's going on, but if you follow what's going on with the county, which is what triggered the conversation about the library and others, the county administrators just came out and said, we need more cuts. We need to cut cost of living increases for all their constitutional positions, like the sheriff and the clerk and those things. So we in Palm Coast have some critical decisions need to be made about the expenses and how our money's going. To show how wasteful we are, for the last 4 years, they've argued the color of your house. 4 years this has been going on. Last night, at the very end of this perceived process of changing the code ordinance, they decided to kick it all the way back to the beginning to have a conversation about whether they should even have a code clarifying the color of your home in Palm Coast. So 4 years worth of staffing and meetings and a plethora of things are now not. But I also, now Kathy's sitting here, I would love to know what your thoughts were on Firehouse 22.
What?
I've been an advocate for preserving it, and turning it into a welcome center and historical society museum, which on October 1st of last year, the city council unanimously voted to do. What was never determined is how it would be funded.
Right.
Which has been the biggest obstacle to anything we've tried to do for the last 25 years. Anything to do with arts, history, and culture is always at the bottom
We don't
of
have
every
any, honey.
funding priority.
So explain to people that don't know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
One of the conversations that our mayor brought up that was not on the agenda, that was not on any piece of paper, he brought up and posed the question of the use of that building because multiple groups, including the Girls and Boys Club and other groups, saw that building as a opportunity. And then the conversation, and your name came up, and
Last night?
that conversation, yes.
Were your ears burning?
Yeah.
No, they weren't burning.
No, but let's do that, and then we're gonna go to county and library issues with Mike. And
Yeah, I
is
wanted
Dee
to
still there?
just,
Yeah.
I
go ahead.
attended the county meeting this
Yeah,
morning.
I know you were, and that's what I,
Where they opened
like
up the
Kathy.
discussion on the budget now.
Yeah.
Nothing is really settled for a bit, but today at least, the county seemed to have the consensus on one of the options presented by Heidi Petito on the library, which would take some of the staffing from here and move it down to the library branch in Bunnell, and keeping both libraries at least functioning at a lower level each. At a lower level each. In other words, this library would only be open for like 40 hours a week. And so that means that they have to make choices between weekends, nights, and regular days.
Yeah.
And so there are gonna be services lost, no matter what.
Okay.
And they
That's-
seem to agree, but they could change it at any time.
They
Let's
formed
talk-
a cultural commission
Yeah.
2 years ago, a cultural commission. And we have exactly 2 cultural things in this county. We've got the theater and we've got the library. And now
At
they're
any
gonna defund it?
Let's save the library, let's Kathy finish, and then, as I
Right.
said, then we'll go to Mike, and
Oh.
we've already gone up, but let Kathy finish, go.
Well, as far as I know, it seems like protocol that the city wanted to have different groups participate in conversations about potential programming for the fire station. Now, it was always my understanding that the city council, including the mayor, advocated that the Historical Society and Welcome Center would be the #1 primary user to be considered for that. But I think in order to make it even appear equitable, they need to discuss the possibility that these other groups might have access to it. Now, the last I had heard, which was a very casual conversation, with Cheryl Massaro, who's on the board of the Boys and Girls Club, they're looking for a more permanent home on the east side of Palm Coast. And when I heard that, I said, you know, the Historical Society is in a building in Holland Park, which is not really a suitable location for a museum, but it could be an ideal location for a Boys and Girls Club.
Yes, that makes
So maybe when we move out of there and into the fire station, you could move into the Holland Park location. In the meantime, I heard rumors that, oh no, they're going after the fire station itself. And when I talked to a couple of the city councilors about it, they said that is not an appropriate location for a Boys and Girls Club, but Holland Park would be. So where it stands now, I don't know. I am the past president. We were able to recruit a new president to take over for me in January. I was to remain on the board for at least the remainder of our term, which would end in January of '26. But due to some conflicts with personalities, I just said, I can't do it anymore. So I'm not privy to any conversations going on now unless I pick up the phone and call, which I have done. I am in no official capacity anymore. And I've been a volunteer. We've all been volunteers all along for 25 years. So my other point was that if we do move into the fire station, the budget needs to find a way to have a paid director, because we currently do not have even a volunteer historian or anyone trained in this capacity. But we've got all kinds of professional people doing all kinds of other things in this city, but nobody is focused on our history.
But you did hear him say that that budget would come under the city manager's purview, and that it was clear that they had money to spend because of the Mark Stowbridge investment and other things that had moved forward. The reason I bring it up in this kind of platform is we the people, everybody that pays attention has a voice and understands, and if enough people show up to the city council and stand there for 3 minutes and say, I remember Teresa going, our old antique fire truck would fit in that fire station. She actually said that. 'cause
Yes, she
it's on-
probably did.
on YouTube. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm bringing it up
Well,
now.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue because we've also seen designs by the architect for the new fire station who did some preliminaries for the original one, which has a retention pond along the front of the building fronting Palm Coast Parkway. And those of us on the board said, how would you drive the antique fire station into that door with a retention pond in the front?
Right.
So there's so many issues, and would they even be willing to consider redesigning that infrastructure layout, which involves drainage and wetlands and all kinds of stuff? I have no idea.
And that's
yeah, okay, go quickly.
That's why you need to pay attention to what's going on in City Hall and at least watch a YouTuber go. Because our city council is notorious for bringing up off-item agenda conversations throughout the entire meeting that just pops up in one of the council members' head, including what happened here.
I'll have to
Yeah,
go back and listen to it because
yeah.
I wasn't paying attention
Oh.
yesterday.
Go back several years, because I believe we were sold on the building of a new city hall, a rather big and elaborate fancy city hall, particularly compared to what they were in before over by, the Democratic Party headquarters, for example. We were sold on it by being told that there would be lots of rooms for lots of city organizations and cultural, that they would be in that building. I think I heard that from John Netz himself, may he rest in peace. At any rate,
Well,
a
didn't
politician
they also scale
would lie.
back the
By the way, be careful, he
original
was
design
from
of
New
it?
Jersey.
was in the
Cochiolos, what happened at the county government this morning, and what's the need we do as far as the future of the library is
Well,
concerned?
I mentioned about the option chosen, which was to reduce options that kept both libraries alive, but reduce their services. No matter what you do, you cut the budget, you're gonna reduce services. So they agreed to that. When I say agreed to move that forward as the option they would favor, that doesn't mean that next week or next month, they can go
Blow it
back. I will say that Kim Carney did most of the speaking about the library, and she asked some good questions, but she has some, really difficult, why are you saying that? I do know that Kim, I know we've known her for 25 years. She has a bad attitude about the library. She has asked the question, why do we need a library? Now, some could ask that, provoking a discussion of baseline budgeting, go up, justify the existence of a library, and then decide on whether you need to run it. I think she asked it because she doesn't really think that you need a library
What's
in
her
Palm
name?
Coast.
Kim
Or any
Carney.
place in the
C
county.
A R N E Y.
Right, but
I'll get my
anyway,
blood boiling.
she did admit, thanks to you and others, she said that is the single most, the single issue that drew the most email to her
Yeah,
was the library. She was inundated with it.
yeah,
Good.
good,
Good.
So we got her attention,
good.
okay? Nobody said anything today about the budget because we want to stay away from it. Let them do the deliberations. We know this is just kind of posturing and things like that. So we don't know, and so we're just going to sit tight until
We're gonna
we
sit
get
tight,
indication.
no going down there with protest signs, hands
No,
off our
no,
library?
None of that, no.
Well,
We don't want to we don't
All
want
you
to
have to do is
upset.
say on delay and we're rounding up.
I know,
We're
but
rounding up.
think of this, okay?
Up there.
Kim
Up
Carney
there.
is the proponent of starting with nothing and then grudgingly giving something. We know that Pam Richardson kind of follows along, but I don't think she really has anything really against the library.
Wait, follows
but the
along
key
who, Kim
vote-
Carney or the rest of the board?
The key vote is Pennington, that's her district with the Benell branch. And she is, and we don't want to do anything that would get them to say, I'll fix them, you know, that kind of reaction. So we want to just lay low. If you want to write letters, you do it. If you want to write emails, you do it.
Petition?
But don't start a fight,
Okay.
okay?
But
We won't
hasn't,
start one, but I'll pick it up.
hasn't Holly Albanese made presentations before the county commission to
Yes.
discuss the benefits of having libraries? I mean, I've listened to those presentations by the Friends of the Library, and that should be enough to convince any commissioner of the benefits of staffing it. I don't understand why this is even a question.
You would think, but there
And
isn't.
everybody keeps talking about the need for public safety, but why is Rick Staley allowed to inflate his budget year after year, and
Rick
everybody
Staley is
just
the
bows
sheriff, Holly
down
Albanese, director of the libraries.
Yeah,
and
how-
says how wonderful he is and what a wonderful job they're doing? And I'm not disputing the need for public safety, but when there's that kind of disparity, people need to stand up and take notice.
When there are so many people that if somebody calls for a welfare check on you, 3 people will show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
because
probably a
why? Because
union
they're sitting
issue.
around doing nothing.
I passed out after donating blood, and I said, I don't need the fire department. Who came roaring over to the big red bus but the fire department?
Yep.
It's part of their contract, and that's a whole nother
But
discussion.
3
Well, in
different
response to
police
your
cars?
question, I think the answer is simply Project 2025.
Yeah.
They don't want an educated
Yeah.
Look at
citizenry.
Yeah.
They're
There's
doing
more
on
than
the,
one
on
way
the,
to burn
on
a
the
book.
university
They
level,
want
on
a
the elementary
militarized
school
police
level, every,
state.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in
It's
between.
just,
And that's what
it
we're
is.
getting.
Yeah,
That's
There's
what
a
we're
couple
getting.
of questions that you need.
And
to-
people are afraid.
yeah.
We are.
I mean, I have many friends who are absolutely petrified to even speak out against
That's
anything.
part of the point, is they
Exactly.
want you to feel helpless.
That's right,
Right.
that's
The-
exactly.
Sometimes I go to bed
And
feeling hopeless, and I
overwhelmed
get up this
and
way.
absolutely
The-
just
The
fed
part,
up.
an element, and then we're going to an element of the development of fascism is self-policing.
That's right.
Yeah, and that ultimately you say,
You're
I
afraid.
better be careful, even
Yeah.
though nobody told me to be careful, I better be careful about what I say
Right.
and how I make use of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Well, and you better be sure to follow all the rules when it comes to public protesting, because I think
Yeah,
this
that's-
morning I read that 250 people were arrested because they blocked traffic in front of the White House to protest the passage of the big beautiful bill.
Yep.
That was organized by 25 diverse faith leaders. So even people of different faiths who came together to protest the bill, because they were in the street blocking traffic, they were all arrested. So if you're going to exercise your freedom of speech, you better stay on the sidewalk.
Right.
And
Germany,
you- and-
1938.
Yeah,
Right,
and you
all the
should,
protests that have been done around here, we
very careful
make
about
sure
that,
that
yeah.
everybody understands there's a certain amount of space that has to be there.
Yeah.
Safety is priority, nobody wants to end up in jail.
Right.
We just
Yeah.
wanna make sure not only that our message is heard, but that other people who are passing by know they're not alone.
have
Oh,
not-
I agree.
Yeah.
I have
Uh,
not been willing to be dragged off by the police since the Vietnam War, and I'm getting to the point.
If you don't know what brown shirts are, you please Google brown shirts, and you'll, again, see that comparison in the
And that brings
development
up
of the thing.
Staley.
But, well, all right, let's go to Sue, and then we'll come back.
I just
And in
find
fact, I
it
want to ask you about petition.
Interesting when you both were talking about the military state and the polarization of library and the contrast and Project 2025. And last week, our discussion was about what? Federal and local overlap.
Yeah, that
You
the
know,
same thing is
where-
going on at
where
the
is our
federal level
focus?
as we see on the local level. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, DeSantis
Uh,
was implementing 2025 before.
All of a
the
sudden,
Feds were.
he's Trump's big buddy
Oh,
down
yeah,
there
they're
in
pals
Alligator
and wowsy
Alcatraz.
now.
Anyway, Mike, you were
You
continue.
gotta be aware that during the past 20 years, the military has been turning over warfighting equipment to localities.
Locals, yeah.
Most of that warfighting equipment went to southern and western localities. And that brings up Staley. He's got a small army now of more than 330 deputies in a town of 14,000,
And he just asked for 9 more.
114,000 community of about 115, 118,000. So he's got 338 deputies. He's asking for 7 more. Now he he brags
said
about
9.
crime rate going down and down,
Yeah.
but he's asking for 7 more deputies.
Mhm.
And
Over a
so
period.
he'll have over 340 deputies in this area, and he's got armored equipment. He has,
Yeah.
they have
SWAT.
certainly semi-automatic and machine guns. They have all the warfighting equipment they need. Southern states have been, southern communities have been doing this. So we've got to be aware, they're armed, okay? And you're right, there's a danger, because at some point they will stop arresting and they will start shooting. So there's that. But then, you know, I listened to this discussion, I listened to a lot of other discussions, and I just want to put out, I am at the point where I've accepted right now that we are living under a right-wing dictatorship. It is a right-wing dictatorship. That was answered by this bill which exempts Trump from scrutiny by either Congress or the courts.
Of course.
Okay? And so he's making sounds like this. Well, somebody spoke out against him, like Musk. I think I may have him deported. I may have, that's not the sound of a president.
Right.
That is a dictator. I may have him arrested.
Absolutely.
I may have him deported. We have a dictator now.
Yeah.
And we should be very frightened at that. So you have to think, I know you're scared, I'm scared, but I'm willing to go to Washington and get arrested. I'm willing to come to
So
the
am I.
streets here
Yeah.
and get arrested. Because at some point, we have to do it. Because we have 3.5 more years, 3.5 more years virtually. If we just say, let's follow the law, there are no laws, there is just Trump.
We'll be the only ones
He's
following
making the laws. We're the only ones following the laws. There are no more laws. There is Trump law. And he's proven that. He's exempt right now from following the law. So we're going to have to, if we're serious about this, hit the streets and get arrested. We have to just simply take the bullet for our children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and all that, if we have to.
And it's going to happen sooner than you think, because that big, bad bill has a section in it that says that any nonprofit organization that goes against administration policy can be declared a terrorist organization. Okay?
There's
So
risk.
he can make the Democrats
Yeah.
a terrorist organization. He can make
He can do anything
this,
about it.
this
Separation of
group
churches,
a
yeah,
I thought
separation
the
of church and
parliamentarian
state.
took much of that out because it was not budget related.
Yeah, I think the.
Well, there's a lot of things that aren't budget related in it.
No, but
Yeah.
I think
No,
she
the
took-
parliamentarian-
the
the
parliamentarian
took
of the
some that
Senate
kind
caused
of
it to be
trash
removed.
out. I don't
And
know
it will
about that,
probably,
but I
it will
remember
probably,
reading about
yeah,
that.
it'll appear in other
Yeah.
legislation.
Well, I'll hit you back at that with
uh,
just one more
yeah.
final thought, because you're getting into the area that I'm most interested in. Even though that may have been stripped out by the parliamentarian, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Trump could do what he wants.
Yeah.
Who's going to say no?
Nobody's
The
gonna say
Marshal-
no. Supreme Court told
The
him
U.S.
to.
Marshal Service? No. The courts? No.
Many times
Governors? No. So he can do whatever he pleases. If he wants to declare the Democratic Party as a terrorist organization, whether it has the force of law or not, it puts a target on our back for armed MAGAs, armed militias. He can do anything he wants to instill fear in us. What we have to do is eventually, if we're going to get through this and have a democracy at the end of this term, which we won't have, but if we're going to get people into the streets, I'm talking by the millions and millions, if we're going to do it, somebody has to go first. And it's going to have to be the people like you all over the country sitting around these tables saying, I don't know what to do, I'm frightened. You have to get over that.
3.2%.
Yeah.
3.2% is what they're saying
Yeah.
has to be in
Turns over,
opposition.
turns over,
3.2.
turns out
So
a
that's
dictator
my thought.
in general.
So if anybody wants
yeah.
to come up with a plan around this community as to what we can do to defy, at first staying within the law.
There's-
But as it progresses, stepping out from that and risk chaining ourselves together or whatever we have to do to disrupt Trump and doing it and spend a few nights in jail or whatever. we
If
do.
you go online, there's the Resistance Lab, which is being run online by Prunella, whatever. She's a Democratic senator from Washington State. And they have these trainings. They have Resistance Lab 1.0 and 2.0. And you watch them online. They take about an hour. They have breakout groups. They then send you the information afterwards on all the ideas that people had for non-violent resistance. I would recommend them to everybody. I attended both of them. I have all kinds of information, and I'm hoping that we're going to be holding sessions from them at the Democratic office over the summer. So keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, there is something else we can do. Randy Fine, our congressman, is up for election. And the fact of the matter is, if we can get a one-seat majority in the House of Representatives, at least they can go forward on impeachment proceedings, and that will occupy Trump's, it will make him angry enough that he'll forget about all the other stuff. He's only got a limited bandwidth.
So I
go
have a
ahead.
question. He's limited bandwidth.
Yeah, he's got, I mean, that's,
It's true.
Do you think that the 2026 election would change anything? Or will it?
Yes.
it
can
yeah.
block a lot.
Yeah,
Do you
I
really
think-
think that it's going to change, though?
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
think that
I
we, I mean,
I
if
think,
he
by the way-
has the military and he has the power.
He doesn't
We
necessarily
can come
have
in
the
and say
military.
anything. The Congress can change and it can become a Democratic House or a Democratic, well, the House is the most likely at this point,
Right.
but
But they can refuse to fund, for example, the White House. In fact, I don't understand why they've cut funding from so many positions. They have not cut funding from the White House.
Christine
I
Noll
think,
needs
I
more
think,
money.
I think Melania can make her own bed rather than
Oh, God.
we pay a butler to go do
How
it in
about
the
the
White
golf?
House. And the golf vacations and so
$3
that
million to $3
that we
million.
pay for, exactly, and
That was it.
alligator,
That's
Alcatraz,
$100
and so on, that we are paying for. I believe that if we have a majority in Congress, that they can do something, including stop the budgeting of these things that will piss him off and will make him pay attention to those things. Again, not much upstairs, the shiny object, just like our children, so he will run after that instead of anything else. Dee, go ahead. Dee.
She's talking about elections. What makes you think we're gonna get elections?
well,
Well,
that's my
another,
whole point.
yeah.
You know, there's a line in this big, bad, beautiful bill that says he's gonna have the power to delay or cancel elections.
He's already told people
Yeah, but that-
before he was elected,
But that's
we
got-
won't
yeah.
need any more elections
By the way,
once I'm
that's-
president.
He said that.
That's a constitutional issue, like the birthright citizenship, that requires 2/3 of the states to ratify the language. First, it has to pass Congress, and so I believe we're a long way from that way. However, there were lots of people who said we're safe and we're not. But anyway,
But the recent court ruling, Merle, with the recent court ruling, I agree with you.
Yeah.
However, with the ruling now is that if he does something that is contra the Constitution, a federal judge says, no, this is contra to the Constitution.
Yeah.
His orders cannot be
Yeah.
stopped until it reaches the Supreme Court and they agree. So what you're talking about is the fact that
Timeliness.
his word is law until the Supreme Court says it's not, and that can be a lengthy process.
It always is.
So
I don't
that
think it's-
whatever counter democratic idea he comes up with and moves forward on it, particularly if it's something that he can move forward on
Sure.
rapidly, that can be moved forward until the Supreme Court says, oh, yeah, that.
Well,
that
they
is
have the
unconstitutional.
shadow docket.
And so far, they haven't.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
but
to
to clarify what you said, it's not completely true, because successfully 22 states in their own class action lawsuits have filed to stop the birther right. And in those states, the Supreme Court decision did not touch what they were doing. They were just saying that individual trial judges do not have the authority to stop national
Yeah, federal.
actions.
Right.
There are still 22 states, per Mark Elias and like 5 other groups, have said they are still in the fight
those EOs, executive orders, have stopped in those states to reach the Supreme Court. Because Supreme Court has admitted, we have not made any decision on the constitutionality of that
Right.
order.
Let me speak to
But,
Al's point.
So,
okay, and then
but
D.
the other states,
then
you're in
D,
trouble.
Yeah.
I want
D, and
to speak
then,
to Al's point and Kathy's point. The vast majority.
you know what, let me interrupt for a second, since you weren't here for introductions. That's Mike Cocciola, D. Cocciola. Mike was the former head of the Democratic Executive Committee, and are you the head of the library, Friends of the Library? Who's
Yes.
the, yeah, head of the Friends of the Library. Anyway, now, go ahead, please.
To answer Kathy's, the majority of officers, senior officers and junior in our United States military are from southern states, the majority. So he controls them. The second thing is that in terms of the Supreme Court, if they vote against Trump, I'll use the analogy of Andrew Jackson, who said they made their decision, now let them enforce it. Remember who owns the judiciary? It is
Leonard Leo.
Donald Trump. Okay?
No,
He
it's
owns the
not Leo.
judiciary,
Yeah.
he owns the
Wait.
military, and
That's
don't
a
think
point
for a
a
moment,
different argument, but yes.
don't think for a moment that the military won't follow him. Some may not, but the vast majority will follow the president.
That's why we have a different head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff than we had when he
Who will
took
follow
office.
Trump.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you honestly
D was-
believe that a 3-year career, 22-year-old Marine in California is ordered to shoot a citizen standing there with a sign, that he will follow that order?
Didn't they
I
do
believe
that?
it. Yes,
Didn't
I
they
do.
do that in
Yeah,
Ohio
okay.
a few years ago?
Yeah, but there was a lot of studies on the inconsistency and direction and confusion of whatever.
But
Being a military person, I don't believe it.
Oh, no, I said
Go-
some won't.
Listen
Yeah, but the
to or
majority
read the
will.
transcript of the Nuremberg trials. That I
Why
hate to keep
don't-
going back to that, but they're following orders.
Why
They're
don't
just
the
fol-
blue states-
Ordinary people.
Yeah,
Why don't
ordinary
the blue
people.
ordinary-
states
Yeah.
stop sending money to Washington? Why don't they hold on to that money and stop sending it? Because let me tell you, it would only be a few months before there would be real big problems. And what is he gonna
It
do?
Just
would only
keep-
be a few months before there would be martial law.
Yeah.
Remember, you're always tipping on the edge
Looking
of
for
martial
any
law.
That's what he
excuse.
wants.
If he gets to declare martial law,
We're screwed.
Okay, if you're not,
Anything.
if you're not
If we're
familiar with the
truth issues,
Reichstag fire,
and that'll be-
I keep
they'll
harping
take
back
over state
to,
governments,
but
they'll take over any-
we've lived this already. This, again, history
And
is repeating itself.
California was
But,
the prime example.
Yeah.
yeah,
He overrode the governor.
He
Yeah.
overrode,
Overrode
he
the
didn't
governor
even
and put
call the
military
governor.
arm,
He
you know.
brought in the Marines, he,
with
A
that,
lot of them have been sent
M4s.
away now, though. They're up fighting far.
Yeah.
if
yeah.
senators and congressmen can be arrested for protesting, any one of
Anybody
us.
can
He
be.
was
arrested.
yeah, they was the senator that they threw to the ground, I mean, he wasn't even protesting, he
No,
was
he
just
was
doing his
asking a
job.
question.
Yep.
He went though to oversee what he's supposed to oversee, he just asked a question and they.
and
Yeah,
that was
did you-
done by
To the ground?
supposed protectors of us.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they threw that senator to the ground.
That was
By the
most
way, did
Don't
you,
believe for a moment they won't.
did you read Rick Scott's response to the senator being thrown to the ground, or Ashley Moody's response? Oh, neither did I. I mean, it didn't happen. They were not the least bit outraged that ICE agents or agents protecting Christine Noem, who, as I said last week, is probably, what's his name, Miller's in drag. And so, anyway.
Trump threatened to
So-
arrest Maladani
Yeah.
because he's Muslim.
Yep.
Well, they have him deported.
Or deported, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, Mike, the county, anything, and library, the petition. Shall we continue the petition or
You
not?
can, yes.
So
The
if
only
you
thing
have
is don't go
not,
to the
if you've been
library,
asked,
don't-
if you haven't signed, I'll send her, please, there's an online petition to ask simply for robust support of our library. Notice, as our county has grown, what they're suggesting is shrinking the support for the library. But the only logical answer is that as the county grows, we need more support for the library.
We get 20,000 people a month flowing through the
Yeah,
doors.
yeah. I mean,
So don't forget to use that, but the only thing you don't want to do is don't insult or personally attack any of the
anybody,
commissioners.
yeah.
No, you can go online and find out how much having a library in the community adds to your property value.
Yeah.
You can do all, and that's the kind of thing that they pay attention to,
Yeah.
So I have a question.
not
They were talking about
citizens.
staffing, which seems to be the rub. Is it true that the grant that paid for the Nexus building, which is where the new library is gonna reside in, had a binding agreement of staffing tied to it?
Yes, there is, the staffing that is binding, that was a $5 million grant, is 7 permanent full-time.
Okay.
So.
And they agreed to that when they,
Is
Yes,
that,
they did.
is that sufficient?
Pam,
Is that sufficient?
Carney?
Carney, she says that's why you gotta be careful with grants, because they put binding grants. So what they had to do was, in the option that they seemed to favor, it would actually have more permanent staff at Manel Branch than here.
Yeah,
And
because
the
of
Manel
that.
Branch is
grant.
1/3 the size
Yeah.
of here.
Now,
When
when
we
you say
have the
that-
bulk of the population,
Pardon?
when Palm Coast has the bulk of the population?
This library is 3
But they're
times.
giving
justify
them
that.
8,000 houses that
Or they
go
rationalize
through.
it.
Yeah, just wait.
She doesn't rationalize
But you're being
No, no, I mean,
logical,
if
and
it's
once again,
standard
logic
grant,
has nothing
how
to
are
do
they-
with.
Oh, they're making staff move from here, and they're putting Holly back
Into the library.
into the library.
Oh, well,
And
that's
That was a pretty
good.
offhanded, disgusting remark. She said she could go back.
Yeah.
She could go back.
She also said, she
Yeah.
also
Talk
told
like
Holly
that.
she wants her
It's-
gone. She wants Holly fired.
Yeah.
She wants the
Yeah, we shouldn't get into any discussion.
Heidi
Yeah.
fired.
Yeah,
We shouldn't
that's not,
get into
yeah,
discussion
yeah.
about a single.
Right, about a
those
single
terms.
individual.
All I want to do is
Yeah.
relate what they're thinking.
Yeah, but there's another, on the national, on the state, and on the local level, an anti-intellectualism. And the ability to read and write and be literate, that to have a library is just
That's what
going by,
Carl
sadly,
was-
going by the wayside.
One question.
That binds national, state,
About
and local.
funding. The half-cent sales tax that's been discussed for beach renourishment that they don't want to pass, would that half-cent sales tax also benefit things like library
I'm-
staffing?
I
If
don't-
it were to be passed?
I don't,
Well,
mean-
typically a sales tax, if it goes into their general fund, would be fine. It could be used for anything. But if they're talking about a 0.5% sales tax specifically for
Earmarking
beach
it
replenishment,
for
in which
beach.
case you can't.
yeah.
But
But-
it doesn't have to be earmarked just for.
No, it doesn't have to be.
But from what I understand, the state legislature allows the 26 smallest counties to implement a half-cent sales tax in order to fund their needs. And of those 26, Flagler is the only county that hasn't taken advantage of passing the half-cent sales tax. Every other county in that category has done it. So why are our county commissioners so thick-headed? Because they just don't like the word tax, even though the people who would be paying it would also be tourists.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
So why is this so hard for them to grasp?
There's a
We
couple
need to
people on
push the
commission-
half-cent sales
Yeah,
tax.
There's a couple of people on the commission who will not back a sales tax.
But it's
Under any
not,
circumstance.
and it excludes groceries, it excludes clothing under a certain amount. So the average citizen is not gonna be impacted as much as the tourists, and that is our main industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the part of some of them, their actions on the county commission are unencumbered by the thought process. I mean, that's.
I mean, I think that
You
one
can-
of the.
you can-
tactful way to
you-
say that.
You can
That we have
actually, you
to
can
push.
actually quote, actually, that's click and clack, the Tappet Brothers car talk from NPR years ago. But yes, you can, really, it defies logic. And depending on I mean, when they institute a tax or any other action, and they say it's for A, B, and C, can you take that to the bank? Absolutely, we can't, they're gonna change their minds, they're gonna redirect it, they're gonna pull some kind of prestidigitation, and it will go someplace else.
And it will go to a salary increase for the
It
board.
will get, right, for the board, and only a 2% COLA increase for the
For
workers.
your information, what they are thinking of doing now, and it's a cumbersome process, is to initiate a tax per household for the beach communities, all the way up to
Yeah.
Marineland. And the lawyer, what's his name, I forgot, he's retiring. He
Al
said-
Hadid?
Al
Yeah.
Hadid,
Hadid,
he
right.
said, that's a very cumbersome process. You have to send a letter out to everybody in those communities, and that's thousands. Then you have to get their input, and then you have to hold hearings on it, and then you have to negotiate, and then you have to do whatever you do. It could take, well, never. It could take right up to never happen. So he was kind of dismissive of that. How, indeed, he doesn't care, he's leaving. But, so that puts the commission in a bind. Let's see, not a tax on the beachgoers, not a sales tax on everybody. There is no answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
No, just cut things, cut.
Cut,
the beach.
cut,
How
yeah.
about we cut the beach?
Cut
We filled it up
the,
with-
cut the library, if we do away
so
with them.
it's clear that the council, the city council understands that we are the cash cow for this county, Palm Coast. We pay twice as much into the county. Their millage is a little over 8%, where they're trying to keep your city millage, and if you don't know, millage is the rate per thousand of the value of your home, at about 4%. But when you look at the amount of the dollar, and I was at the open forum conversation town hall with Teresa last week, and I brought up the question of knowledge of the additional contract we in the city pay for the sheriff performance support, which, by the way, by law, they're required to provide whether we give them a dime, because we give them a lot more than a dime. And she shared with me that she was in conversation with Staley about this upcoming need of staffing. And he shared with her that the state patrol has been cut by budget cuts, and that they have requested that our county sheriffs are now patrolling the interstate
Yeah.
in our county.
Are we getting the revenue from that, from the
We're not
tickets?
getting
or
a dime
anything?
from
Yeah.
them,
Well-
to the tune of like 6 sheriffs. So the question that I'm asking you is, if Palm Coast is 80% of the monetary support for the county, then doesn't Palm Coast have a fairly loud and firm voice of what happens and where it goes, to the tune of supporting our library, to
Yes.
the tune of why are we spending $11 million for 7 or 9, whatever the amount of sheriffs they have?
Deputies.
And where is that conversation?
We can also look at that overlap once again, when you look at that point and the fact that the blue states in our nation fund so much of the services of the
Right.
red states.
And it
so
filters down.
How
But
much of a say do
quickly,
they have?
Yeah.
in what's
Right.
Quickly, the city certainly, on the things under their purview, decide. So they do not have to fund the sheriff's department, nor do they have to pay for the sheriff's department to patrol the highways. They don't have to. The city could impose their own tax to do that. I mean, the county can do that, but the city does not have to agree. So the city can not agree to a bunch of things under their purview, but on things that are on their county purview, and it's defined, you may get a phone call and invited to a meeting, but you don't get billed. The county will do what the county's gonna do.
Yeah. What struck me was that the county was asking for the sheriff's department to eliminate $3 million from their budget, and then suddenly Palm
Never
Coast
gonna
is they're adding, going from 9 to 11 million, they're upping it from our side, and then another 330 something for cameras that'll, identify license plates. Why is it all coming from us? I don't understand this.
You
It's like,
always-
oh, you had to cut, but now we're giving it up because they cut? That makes no sense to me.
All right,
It's gonna end up around the same amount.
there's a bias on the commission, not at Palm Coast, on the commission, to ease the pain of the beachers, all the way from southern Flagler all the way up to Greenland, to ease their pain.
What
Okay?
pain is that?
Pay taxes. So,
They're
and
paying
to
Well,
put
if
the
they can
burden,
afford
Yeah.
those
and
houses,
Yeah.
to
they
put the
can pay the
burden
free
on
taxes.
Yeah.
folks, because we're 80% of the county, and the theory is, well, that we must be 80% of the beach usage. So why shouldn't we pay? Now, the city has said no, hell no. But if the county wishes to maneuver around what the city has authority for, they can do that. Like a half.
Just like they did with the
That's
bridge.
why we
Yes, they
need
can
to
do
have
anything they want,
sense.
as long as it's not
Yeah.
within the city's purview as given by the
Gas
state.
tax.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you
Yes,
keep
yes.
us informed about the library, because if they think that all the hoo-ha about the fuel terminal was a headache for them, they ain't seen nothing
Nothing yet.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put out a monthly newsletter, and I cover these items. I will, so I cover these items, as well as programs and newsworthy items regarding, but you gotta belong to the FOL.
Right, friend of the
$10 a
library.
year, $10 a
Or
year.
whatever you.
I
If you don't pay your $10, you get nothing.
Yeah.
Nope, I won't even talk to you.
Okay.
But for
yeah.
$10, you will
You get
actually talk to me
$10,
face to
you
face.
get me.
Go
Oh my
online. You can do that online.
You
If you
get,
really,
Yeah,
really
okay.
wanna go for it, it's $15 for a family.
Yes. Yeah. So be a big
Dig
spender.
deep and support the
Yeah.
Friends of the Library.
Be a
My
big
cat died in
spender.
December,
That-
so.
On behalf of the few of us who still read, yeah.
Oh, it's more than about reading. When
Yeah.
I just
No, no
remember,
question.
I was a kid, I was part of, we were 7 children in the family, and I would regularly get dropped off at the library, straight
Right.
to the children's section.
Absolutely.
Calm and peaceful, and everything you picked up transported you to a totally different location. I wouldn't be the person I am
Yeah.
today if it wasn't for the time at the
You should be
library.
here when
I-
they
yeah.
do yoga, the kids do reading with the cats.
Yeah.
It's not so calm.
At any rate, at any rate, and with this, we'll wind this up. But I actually, because the library is so important to that community, and I'm looking for signatures to sign a petition to say we need robust support for the library, I had to hold my nose and post that on the homeschooling page, because homeschoolers themselves, as foolish as that is, are big users of the library. The big users of the library.
okay, if you wanna
Uh,
join us, please, we need every
Yeah.
vote, we need everybody to stand up for the library. You can join the Friends of the Library
I have.
online, flaglerlibrary.org.
Yeah.
There's a button up the top for FOL, you click on that, and then you can join right there online.
Right.
And just
Okay.
to show that it's more than-
Flaglerlibrary.org.
just to show that it's
Flaglerlibrary.org.
more than books.
Yeah, and we're here thanks to the library, by the way.
Passports.
They need a place-
Yeah.
Internet,
What about us?
Yeah.
taxes.
We wouldn't have this room, and if you get an opportunity to talk to somebody from the library, thank them for making this room available. By the way, it's available to us only once a month, and we'll have to be out of the separate room at the golf course on the 23rd, but perhaps we won't record that day, and we'll just sit in the dining room rather than go to Olive Garden as we did in the past. But make sure to join us around these tables, or a table like this at the Pine Lakes Golf Course next Wednesday at noontime. Thank you for being here, and have a good week, but don't sit and do nothing. There's too much to do.